Is my voice clear, guys? If my voice clear, please respond in the chat.
Join now. Literally.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hussein Khalifa, chairman of IEEE KFU branch, and I would like to welcome you all in our first lecture in this semester, Guide to Technical Writing, Industrial Report, and Scientific Papers. I'm sorry for the delay, and we can go start now. Uh, it's my honor to host this lecture presented by Dr. Mohammed Al Aqil, and I'm sure it will be valuable for us and a very helpful skill to acquire in our journey as students or as engineers. I don't want to take any more time of your time, guys. So, Dr. Mohammed, you are most welcome to start.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you very much for the introduction and for organizing this event. And I hope that everyone will gain, some information regarding our topic, which is the guide to technical writing. We will talk about industrial reports or scientific reports, and as well as scientific papers. So I would like to welcome everyone on board, and I hope that you'll enjoy this presentation. The agenda for today we'll start with a very simple question, but with a very valuable answer, actually. So what makes a good technical report? This is our first task for today. And then the second element on our list is preparing the objectives and report planning. Then we'll move on to formatting the report. We will focus on the main sections, how you can start formatting your report, and how actually you can present your diagrams as well. And then we'll move on to the writing techniques and proofreading. This will help us, as well to we'll gain some techniques actually when it comes to writing the information that you have gathered or the results that you are trying to show. And then I will provide 10 laws of good report writing. This will help us in actually in preparing the our report as well as writing. And then I will move on to the scientific paper actually bit, where we will talk more about preparing a scientific paper. So assuming that we have a full study, we have a full report, and or we're trying to convert this full report or part of it into a scientific paper actually to publish in a journal or in a conference. So this is our roadmap for today, and I hope that we'll be able to gain knowledge as well as some technical skills in regards to writing and preparing reports and papers. Before we start with our first element, can everybody hear me and see the slides clearly? So are you able to see the slides, guys? Okay. I believe that I have received some responses, so I believe that we are able to see the slides. Okay, excellent. So let's move on. So our first element, which is based on report writing, actually. So we'll talk about, or we'll try to answer this question. What makes a good technical report? This applies to any report that we are trying to prepare. This could be a course report. This could be your project or your graduation project report as well. So this is what we will try to answer actually in our first part. So what makes a good report? Obviously, a good report is a report that is easy to recognize. So you can give it to anyone to read, and they will be able to understand, even if they have, some of the knowledge that you have, or even if they do not know anything actually about your project or the topic that you are researching or experimenting, but they will be able to understand actually what is going on. So we can say that the report has to be informative. In other words, full of information, basic information, advanced information, and its format has to be logical to the reader actually, and this is what we will look at or we will review in the upcoming slides. So what is the logical sequence of your report? So your report must have actually a flow. So it must flow from a very generic and broad description to the project, and then you narrow down until you come up to the conclusion. Okay, so with the headings provided in your report, it must have a format or a logical, let's say, sequence or flow, so that you can prepare the headings and you go ahead and fill in the blanks in your report. Diagrams as well, we'll talk about them in more details, but they will help to clearly show the value of your report, or to show what is the contribution of your report to the field. So this will be, the diagrams has to be again, or the diagrams have to be well presented, and they have to be clearly labeled. Okay. So there are, I want to emphasize on this point, this is very important. There are no absolute rules actually when it comes to the production stage of your report. So there is no specific rule. It depends on the purpose of the report. So you are preparing the report for, is it for a company, for a university, for your manager, for some engineers, for some researchers? So it depends. There are so many reasons and so many rules actually on how you produce your report. But today I will give a very generic guideline that will help us actually in preparing the report, starting from zero, starting from scratch. Okay, so that is actually the main point when it comes to preparing your report, and more importantly, that we need to prepare the report by targeting the audience. So you need to know your audience. Your report will be, are you targeting students or targeting scientists, professors? So we have to decide. Okay. Just give me a minute so that we can resolve the slides issue. Okay, let's move. Um, so as I was mentioning actually just now that basically you have to know the audience that you are targeting. So whether your report is targeting, a specific type of audience, for example, your colleagues, your students, your professors. So you have to make sure that you are preparing the report based on and targeting the right audience for your report. So this guide, as I mentioned, will be providing actually some laws, some guidelines, but they are not necessarily applied to any report. As I mentioned, they are very generic, but but they will guide us actually on preparing a report based on the very generic rules provided by some standard organizations like IEEE, IET, and so on. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do actually before we start writing is to set the objectives. So let's say that you have a project, you are planning or you are trying to start an experiment, and out of this experiment you are trying to find the results. So you have to set the objectives, or in other words, your proposal for the project has to be clear. So the objectives that you prepare for the report will be guiding you actually on the final product out of the report. So before we start writing, we have to set the objectives. You have to be clear with your objectives. So we have to provide 1, 2, 3. These are my objectives for this study. These are my objectives to prepare the report for the study we are trying to conduct. So you have basically to make sure that you set your objectives. Okay. So one advice is that you note down the objectives from the very beginning. So you say objective number 1 is to, for example, provide a literature review, a full literature review on this topic. Objective number 2 is to prepare the material, to prepare any equipment, any device. Objective number 3 is to conduct this kind of experiment. Objective number 4, for example, to compare the results of case A with case B and come up with conclusions. So something like that. You have to come up with your list of objectives, okay? And that will help us to produce the report and its elements. So our objectives should identify the following. So these are the key points that will identify the objectives of our reports. So to make it easy for us, you have to ask the 3 WH questions when you prepare your objectives. So these 3 WH questions actually will help us to prepare or to list down our objectives. So the first question is, who are you producing the report for? Again, who will be the reader? Who will be your audience that will be using this report? So the first question is, who are you producing the report for? Question number 2 will be, why are you producing the report actually? What is the problem you are trying to solve? Okay, so this will be your second question that you have to ask yourself before you even start writing, or at the proposal stage actually of your study. And then question number 3 will be, what information are you covering? So what are the information that we will be covering in this project, or in this study, or in this report? So what are the limitations of your study? So you have to set the boundaries actually for your study. So you say that your study will be focusing on specific areas. So this has to be very clear in the objectives, okay? So that we can limit the information we provide in the full report. So these are very important 3WH questions that you have to ask yourself, and they will help you actually to set your objectives. So I'm stressing on this point. It is very important and critical to us when we write our reports that we consider the reader. So you have to put yourself on the reader's side. Okay, so you have again to know the targeted audience for your study. So knowing your readers will actually help you to progress in your report, and will somehow shape the style of your report in terms of illustrations, figures, tables, in terms of writing, how difficult, how advanced your writing should be. So the technical content and the style of your writing will be decided when you know your reader actually, or who will be reading your report. Okay, so there are some other questions, and I will provide a list of some other questions that might help us actually to prepare the objectives and the report plan. And you have to ask yourself actually, or if you are working in a group and you're trying to produce a report, so you have I think that discussing such questions or asking such questions within the group, within your group members, will help actually to prepare the objectives for your report. So there is a long list of these questions, but I have selected some of them. So for example, if we look at some of these questions, you might ask, what does the reader already know about the subject? So if it is something, let's say, you are trying to study, you're trying to perform some experimentations. So again, before we start preparing the objectives, we have to know your study or your report will be targeting which audience, what type of audience. Okay, and then if you ask this question, I think it will help you to decide on that actually, and will help you to decide what level of how deep you should be providing the information actually within the report. So this will lead us to the second question, which is, what do you need to tell the reader actually? Do you want the reader to know all the details, or do you just need your reader to basically know the outcome of your study? So it depends again on your reader. Then there are some a very long list of these questions, but I would like to emphasize on the one just before last. So how can you bridge the gap between the reader actually and what they know and what they need to know, okay, in order to produce the desired response? So this is a very important question, I think, and it will help us a lot to prepare the objectives for our reports. So there is a gap actually. So you are trying to fill in when you do a study. You are trying to contribute with something in you. So you need to sit in the position of this gap, and you have to see what people already know, what your readers already know, and what you are trying to educate your readers about, what you are trying to add to your readers. Okay, and then therefore, when we exist in that gap between these two sides, you will be bridging both sides and clarifying actually to your readers, and building on their knowledge or on what they already know. Okay. So this is an important question, and you can have a look on all the other questions. I think they will help us in preparing the objectives. So we have to note that writing reports actually for multiple readers is a very difficult task. So if you are trying to target more than one type of your audience, so for example, if we have a diverse kind of audience, let's say your project involves something technical and something based on financial, for example, or needs financial analysis or economic analysis. So this involves two different areas. So this is a very important task, and it could be time consuming. So you have to focus on or decide which one of these areas is it the technical or the financial, for example, will be more critical based on your audience. Okay. And one way actually to tackle this problem, if you have such complex study which involves some technical work as well as some economic analysis or financial analysis, so you have or you can use within your report the appendices actually within your report or the appendix, so that you can provide some additional information, and we'll talk about that later on actually. So the appendix so you can gather information, you can set the objectives in your report, and the additional information, okay, let's say on the economic analysis, so you're focusing on the technical side, the economic analysis is the least that you're focusing at. So what you can do is you can add all the details in the appendix in your report, but you can still have that within your objectives. Okay. So it is very clear, very important to have a clear objective, actually, or to state or list down the objectives of your report as we discussed. What happens if we do not provide, such clear objectives? This will actually mislead the reader when they try to, because you are not sure actually yourself about the objectives and they are not set clear. So this could mislead the readers when they try to follow up on your report, and they might get lost within your report because the focus is not there. Okay, so we have to make sure that we write our objectives. It is a very difficult task actually to set the objectives, but we have to be clear as much as we can when we write the objectives. Okay, so some examples. If, for example, I am trying to prepare a report which is meant to cover the climate change in the Middle East. For example, my report is researching the climate change in the Middle East. Okay, but instead, in my report, I just focused on on our case in Saudi Arabia, and they focused on Kuwait, for example. So this was, my study in this, or the results in this study, which is the climate change in the Middle East, handled the climate change effect on 2 countries only. So this will actually, lead to, or you will lose a lot of opportunities actually within your within your report, and no one will be able to follow what you are showing. No one will be able to understand, okay, the effect, which is on a regional base actually, and you are focusing on some certain countries. So you have to be very specific. You have to be very specific when you set your objectives. If it is for the Middle East, then you have to focus on the Middle East as a whole. Giving examples is fine on some countries existing on the region, but you have to, your results have to touch on the full region. Okay. Another example, for example, you are preparing a report and you are trying to include in your report 2, different topics. For example, specification of a machine. So we have a machine. This report is trying to highlight or trying to show the specifications of this machine. Okay. And besides that, we are trying also to include the use of this machine, how using this machine actually. So the specifications and the usage of this machine all together actually will bring your readers into confusion. So you have to focus on your report. Is it to focus on the specifications of the machine, or to focus on, for example, how to use this machine? Okay, so we have to be very specific, we have to be clear, and this will help us in preparing the report, the full report, and not losing or not consuming unnecessary time. Okay, so these are some examples that highlight the, or answering the question, what happens without, clear objectives. So I will conclude on the preparing the objectives and report planning by saying that we have to be very specific and we have to know our objectives before we move on into any other stage in our study or in preparing the report. Okay, let's move on to the other element in our study today, which is formatting the report. I will start with the main sections and diagrams, okay, and then we'll move on to the the referencing style and the proofreading later on. But now let's focus on preparing the or formatting the report. Now we have set the objectives, we have done the experiment, we have some results, we are progressing. Now we need to start writing our reports. Okay, so we are at this stage. So the main sections and the diagrams in your report are very important and will help the reader actually to scan through your study based on their interest. Okay, so once we have set the objectives, we have to start organizing the available information now, okay, within our report. So we have, of course, as we are preparing the report, we will have to find some material. For example, if this was your literature review, so you will be gathering all sorts of information from the very beginning. Okay, so this is a guideline on how you can classify or categorize the information that you gather. Okay, so generally we have three categories that we can classify the gathered information based on the topic you are researching or your study. So category number one is the important information that are relevant to the objectives. So we have set the objectives. Now we have gathered some information. So what we have to decide what the material that you have, if it is very relevant to the to your study, it is basically highly related, let's say, to the topic you are trying to research, then you have to set this as the first category, and this is your priority number one. Okay, so this is the most important information. Then we move on to the borderline information, or to the information that you are not really sure about if they are related to your research topic, or they might and they might not. Okay, but they can be sometimes as supporting material if you are lacking any important material. So they can support the important, let's say, material. This is priority number two, or this is the second category. Category number three is the information that which may be interesting to you. You are keen to know about such actually studies, to learn or to gain such information, but they are not relevant to the objectives. Okay, they are too detailed. They are not within the scope of your work. So this will be the third category and priority number three. So this will help us actually to sort the information that we gather, whether they are some technical papers, some reports, and they will help us when it comes to assigning the main sections of the report. Okay. So for category number three, of course, we have to set aside. We have to try to ignore in the first stage in our study. We might try to avoid, let's say, the information that are not relevant to the objectives, and we can check them later if we need actually at a later stage. But for the material at category one, which is the most important information, and category two, which are the borderline, the ones that we are not really sure about, these have to be kept available, and you can think of them as if the category number one was the main text. So you will get the main text from the first set of information, which is the important information that you have categorized, and The borderline information you're not sure about, you can leave them in the appendix and use them later if you need, or if you need to expand any explanation or any description of any part of your report. Okay, so after you categorize the information that you have gathered, let's say this is a literature review as I mentioned. So you gather all the information, you sort the information based on these categories, or you can have your own category actually, but based on this guideline. So you can start looking now at deciding what is the order of your report now, what is the flow of your report, and therefore you start establishing the main sections of the report, which is in the next slide. Okay, so let's talk now about the main sections and subsections. So we set the objectives, we started our study now, we are trying to gather some information. We gathered a lot of information, then we categorized the information into 3 categories. Okay, I hope that everyone is following me up to this stage. Now let's move on to the main sections and subsections. Now we are trying to start, writing within our report or organizing our report. So you have to think of dividing the information as we have discussed and placing them now in headings. So the most important information that you have gathered, now perhaps you can come up with the list or the main headings within your report so that you can fill in the blanks within your report using this material. So the advice here is that you come up with, you propose some main headings in your report. So let's say literature review. Then you start with, heading number 1, heading number 2, heading number 3, and then you add some, you leave this blank, and then you add some information based on the resources that you have gathered. And these will be based on the categories that we have talked about. So the advice here to sum up this slide is to open a blank Word document, start building your main sections without any information. Do not think about the information you will be adding. Just prepare the Word document and try to come up with the main headings in the report, in this blank document. So you say, okay, the main section number 1, main section number 2, main section number 3. So this obviously for us, for example, in science and engineering, so most of the time we have the introduction as the first main heading. The second one will be your literature review. Third one will be methodology. Fourth one, results and discussions. Fifth could be the conclusion, and so on. Okay. So these are some of the main headings or the chapters basically, and then you can set the subsections under each one of these headings based on the information that you have gathered that will achieve your will help you to achieve your objectives. Okay. So let's move on to the section headings. So if you do not have any template, which is the case most of the time, let's say you are a student here in the university, or let's say that you are an engineer working in a company, and then you are asked to prepare a report. So you have to check. The first thing that you have to do to check, is there a template that you have to follow? This will save you plenty of time. But let's say at the let's base our discussion on the worst case. The worst case is that you will not have any template. You have to come up with or to build your report from scratch, from zero. So this is, the standard content of any report is as follows, actually. So you start with a title page. This is the first page. So you start with a title page, and then the second one, and the sequence is very important here, guys. So this is a sequential order. So the title page, and then the acknowledgements. So if you want to acknowledge anyone who contributed to this study, or anyone who sponsored or funded your study or your research, so you can. This is optional. So you can add the acknowledgement, or it's up to you. Okay, or you can just neglect this main section. Then you move on to the summary part, or the abstract, as we have it. So we might have a full summary, one complete page, or we might have a shorter version of our summary, which is the abstract. Okay. Then the table of contents will come next after the abstract, and then the introduction, basically, which shows the objectives of the study, the scope of the study. Perhaps you can show the main content of your report. Showing or summarizing all the chapters, so and their content. So you say, for example, chapter 1, this is a summary about it. Chapter 2, a summary about it, and for all chapters, and so on. Procedure, or or we can say the literature review, actually, for us most of the time. So you have to come up with a literature review, and then the procedure will and by the way, some standard templates, they will include the literature review as part of the introduction. But to clarify our reports, it is advised that we have the literature review as one separate chapter by its own. Then the procedure is your methodology. Okay, so you have to report your methodology. And then after the methodology, your findings or results, and if you have any discussions, any comparisons. Okay, and then the conclusions. So you conclude your study, and then obviously the recommendations. So based on the conclusions or based on the findings out of the study, you can provide recommendations. And then the references, of course. You have to show the list of references that you have cited within your report. And then the appendix. Okay, so this is the main sections in any standard report, actually, that we can prepare our report based on this general guideline in terms of main sections. So prepare a document, as we mentioned, put in or list down the main sections as an example, the ones you see now in the slides. Leave the pages blank. So each one could be on a different or on a separate page. Leave them blank, and then start adding the information in each one of the main sections or the section headings based on what you have available. So let's say you have the objectives, you have the scope. So start with the introduction chapter in this case. Okay. You can also actually, most of the time, if you are writing a report after you have completed your experimentations, you have completed your project, so you start with the findings chapter, okay, or findings section in this case. But it's up to you. So you can see what information are available at the stage where you would like to start writing your report, and you start filling in the blanks or filling in the pages based on the order that or based on the main sections that you have set. You can combine, as I mentioned, you can combine one or two of these main sections based on your need, actually, in the report. So, for example, merging, for example, the introduction and literature review together. Some reports do that, but some would advise that no, we keep the literature review apart by itself, and this will help to simplify the report, actually. So it's up to you. If you do not have any standard template you have to follow from a company or from your university, then you can basically, come up with this standard main headings or main section headings, and then you start filling in the blanks. Okay, so let's move on to the notations. Notations basically is how we list the headings and the subheadings. So let's say that within my report, I have heading number 1, which is the main heading, based on the list we had on the previous slide. Then I have a subsection now, 1.1, and then I have, a smaller heading, 1.1.1. So let's say this is chapter 1, or this is the first main heading. And in my report, I have also the same order for the other chapters or the other main headings. Let's say in chapter 8, as an example, I have a main heading. Then I have, one subsection. And then for this subsection, I have a smaller heading. Okay. So what I want to highlight here is that the value okay, of each one of the headings have to be equivalent. So if this is literature review, for example, 1 is literature review, then 8 should be, for example, results. So it has to be equivalent in weight and value. So this applies to all the headings. So you have to organize your headings and to make sure that they are actually they hold the same level of value within your report. Okay. In the appendix, you can prepare your appendix based on, this is an example, let's say Appendix B 2.4. This is the standard way that we prepare the appendix, actually. So what does it mean, Appendix B 2.4? This means that this is the fourth subsection within the appendix, okay? Of the second major section, actually. So this is B, so it's the second major section, and it is within the fourth subsection, so B 2.4. So you can follow this standard way of, you do not have to follow that, but it's just an example of preparing all the headings for your appendix. So it is also advised that you do not go less than or more than, this is small heading. So if we have 1.1.1, it is advised that you limit your list up to this level. It is not advised that you go, you add one more decimal. Okay, so having, for example, 1.1.1.1. Okay, it will be confusing. So it is advised that we keep our reports within these three levels of headings. Okay, if necessary, then you can add more. Okay, but this is the standard reports. We find out most of the time that they are limited to these three levels. Now let's talk about referencing and the types of references. This is very important part for us within our reports. So we have to be accurate, of course, when you show your references, and your references will reflect to the reader how credible your project and how honest you are actually and how accurate you are in showing the information or presenting the information in your report. So we have to make sure that we pay attention to our references and we select our references carefully. Do not just plug in any reference you find. Do not just Google and, for example, you find any information in Wikipedia, use that as a reference. This is not a good practice. So you have to select your references carefully. Okay. I will focus more on the referencing system, actually, how you reference. Let's assume that you have gathered your information, you started writing, you have added, you are trying now to add the references within your report. Okay, so there are basically two for us in the science and engineering subjects. We most of the time focus or use the IEEE referencing style or the Harvard referencing style. So these are two referencing styles that we most of the time follow when it comes to science and engineering. More preferably actually is the IEEE references, because most of the time when we publish, we use the in IEEE, we use their referencing style. For example, the IET, if you are publishing in the IET, they use the Harvard referencing style. So what is the difference between these two referencing styles? I will give now the description for each one of these referencing styles. If you are using the IEEE, which I really recommend, it is easier actually to use. If you are using the IEEE referencing style, then in the text, if you are adding the reference or you're citing the reference in the text, within your text, so you add the reference, okay, by including it as a number actually between square brackets. So for example, if this is statement, in this statement I have have to include a reference. So this is my first reference, so I will include the number of the reference this is within the text, not in the list. Okay, at the end of the report, this is within the text, within the main text in the report. So you have to insert that as based on the number of reference and between square brackets. This is the IEEE style. Okay, and then you have to provide the full reference list at the end of your report, actually. And for example, reference 1 will be 1, and then you have to report your reference. This is in the list. Reference 2, you have to write the details of the document that you have cited, okay, in the list. This is the list at the end of your report. This is how we cite within the text, okay. There is a guideline that you can provide in IEEE website. You can see their referencing style, and you can see, they have their own guideline. When you are citing a conference paper, then there is one style. When you are citing a journal paper, there is a different style. So you can find that easily on the IEEE website. Perhaps we can send that later on through the IEEE students branch. We can send these documents later on after the presentation. So this is the IEEE standard style or referencing style. Now let's move on to the other referencing style, which is the Harvard referencing style. This style basically is different than the IEEE. So within the text, you do not provide the reference as a number, actually. You provide the reference by showing the surname of the author. Okay, so let's say that this statement, I have to reference this to provide the citation for this statement. So the way that you can do that is by within these round brackets. Okay, you have to write down the surname of the author you are citing and the year or date of publication. Okay, which is basically the year. Okay, so this is the Harvard style. Within the text, this is how we include the reference, actually. Okay, at the end of the document, the list of references, there is you have to provide the full, of course, the full details of the reference that you have cited. There is again the Harvard style. You can follow the IET guideline. So IET, they have their own guidelines, and their referencing is based on the Harvard style, actually, referencing. And perhaps we can send that as well to all of attendees after the presentation. Okay, so this is these are the two main or major referencing styles that you may follow. And of course, you have to check. For example, if you are publishing in IEEE, you have to check what referencing style they are using. Obviously, it's the IEEE. Okay, so within your report, if you do not have any standard guidelines or any rules, then you can use either one of these. For online materials, if this material that you are citing is, for example, an article in a website, it is not a book, it is not a scientific paper, it's not a report, so it's something that you have found online. So the way that you cite that, actually, that within the, you do not only provide the link, but you have to provide the where you have found this piece of information online, and then you have to write it this way. So between square brackets, you say that this is online. It is not published book, not published scientific papers. This is online, okay? And you have to write it as it is. So you say online, available at, and then you provide the link, okay? And also you provide between square brackets the date that you have accessed the article. So that, for example, there are some websites that are down now. No, they are not in use anymore. So the reader will be able to identify when you have the time that you have accessed actually this piece of information, when you cited or when you use this as a reference to cite within your report. Okay, so this is for the online or materials found online. Okay, so let's that's enough for the referencing style. You can find a lot of guidelines, a lot of standard guidelines like IEEE, IET. They will guide you on preparing your references. There is a website as well, which I did not include because I'm not marketing for them, but there is a website that some websites that will help you to generate the list of references. So you provide only the details and then it will generate the list. An example of that is a website called Cite for Me. Cite for Me is a very useful website that you can access, and it will generate your list of references. So when you finish your report and you do not have time to prepare basically your references manually, so you can use the some online websites that will help you. One of them is the Cite for Me website. You can also use some software like EndNote. This is a software that will help you to cite and to generate automatically the list of references. So you can keep these for your records and use them when it is needed. Now let's focus on the writing of the report. So the writing style, or let's look at some writing techniques. So I will start with, I quoted this actually from some experts. So they say that a well-written piece of report is easier to read. So I'm highlighting the key points within this quote. So easier to read. So always make your report easy to read, easy to follow. Do not complicate things. Okay. Makes your meaning clear and builds the reader's confidence in what you are saying. Okay. So you have to focus on making a report as simple as possible. And this applies not only to the main text that you write, but also to the flow of the report, the way that you present your report in terms of styling, font size, font type, and so on. So we have to choose that carefully so that we make it easier for the reader actually to follow and to be able to build some confidence that you have spent some time actually on your report. It is based on hard work, and I can get or gain some trust while I'm reading. Okay, when it comes to proofreading and writing and proofreading your report, spelling is one of the main issues. So you have to make sure that you check the spelling of any piece you write. And you have to make sure that you are, using the spell checker. Sometimes the spell checker programs that, for example, in the Microsoft Word, they will not be able to pick up or to detect some kind of words. For example, if you are using the wrong word, for example, if this is an example, if you try this in the Word document, then it will accept this actually. Okay, so sometimes not and now, okay, for instance, are easily confused. So the Word document spell checker, for example, will not be able to pick up such use of wrong words within the statement. It is not wrongly spelled, but it is wrongly utilized or used in the statement. Okay. Technical words, for example, I will highlight on this. It's very important because sometimes we use some technical words. So you have to carefully check the spelling of the technical words that you use. And there are some new technical words that sometimes they are, they are composed of more than one word combined together. For example, if you are trying to write cybersecurity, okay, so it depends. Sometimes we use a hyphen, okay, to separate both. So we say cyber, then hyphen, security, or it is considered as one word. So these are it is one of the new technical words that the spell checkers are not really sure about, how to spell these. So this depends on you actually as a writer. which way you would like to present this. Email, for example, is it with a hyphen or without? So you have the advice here, which one to use actually in your writing. The advice is that you check some standard journals, some standard documents, how they present these words. Or if you are not sure, okay, about these words, you have found some references writing it this way, some others writing it the other way, then it is advised that you neglect this hyphen and you write it as one full technical word actually. Okay, so this is the advice in this case. Moving on to the some commas, actually it is very important. I will very briefly go through this because it is part of the proofreading. So for example, if I have this statement and the use of punctuation actually, which such as commas, is very important because sometimes it can change the meaning of the statement. So let's take this as an example. The engines, and then I have between two commas, which were in perfect running order, had been tested previously. Okay. And then if I write this without the commas, so I say the engines which were in perfect running order had been tested previously. So these two statements have two different meanings. With the commas, okay, these mean that the first statement means that all engines were in perfect running order and had been tested. So all the engines in perfect running order actually. The other one without the commas means that only the engines in perfect running order had been tested, not all the engines had been tested. So for us as engineers and scientists, we have to make sure that we deliver the right meaning to the reader actually. So you have to be very critical when it comes to writing any piece of information. This is a good example that you can reflect upon as an example. Hyphens, as I mentioned just now, so sometimes they are important. So the word cross section is heavily used actually in engineering and science applications. So it could be without the hyphen, it could be with the hyphen. So it depends. But most of the time we use the hyphen because we know that we refer to the cross. This is the normal way that you see the word cross section existing in a lot of the publications. Okay, so the hyphen must be used for compound adjectives. For example, if you say 3 years, 4 years, 1 year, then it is advised that you have the hyphen because this is a compound adjective. You can Google that if you are not familiar with compound adjectives, so that you get familiar with compound adjectives, because if you do not write this hyphen within the compound adjective, then it might be misleading. Okay, so when I say 3-year plan, so the spell checker might say 3 years plan, which is in writing it is wrong actually. Okay, but when you say 3-year plan, this means that 3 years is the adjective for the plan actually. Okay, so that is the use. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Check compound adjectives. It is important when you proofread, when you check your writing. Sentences, I would say avoid lengthy sentences. Make sure that you provide any sentence you write as short as possible. Okay, and do not expand the sentence. So a sentence, no, this is the rule of thumb, should not exceed 1.5 lines actually. So 1 line and half of the other line below it. This is the maximum a sentence should be, unless it is necessary that you have to show a lengthy sentence. But this is a rule of thumb. So make sure that you avoid longer sentences. But sometimes it is better to discuss with a longer sentence. So it's up to you. Paragraphs, again, within 1 page in your report, make sure that you do not have one full page of text, one very long paragraph within one page. At least within one page, if you have a lengthy text, you split that to at least 2 paragraphs. But more paragraphs, like 3 or 4 paragraphs, is also a good practice, because it will, it will look easier for the readers to follow. Actually, it will be readable, okay, within your document. So do not write, full pages of text. Make sure that you split this full text into the report. Formality and the use of words, I will very quickly go on this. So how formal your report should be, this will be based on the audience, or who will be reading the report. So if it was to, for example, you're preparing this to your colleagues or to your students, then you should use very simple words. You should avoid, very advanced wording within your document. I would like to highlight on the last point, which is the use of straightforward active voice. So we see this very common in reports within the college. So you say "I recommend," or if this was a group project, you say "we recommend." This is acceptable, but it is not. You are not advised to do that. This is not a good practice, because in academic writing this is not allowed. But let's say that it is allowed, okay, in any course or in any report guidelines, then you can use that. But it is advised that you use the passive instead. Okay, so instead of saying "we recommend," you say "it is recommended that," and then you state the recommendation. Okay, so we avoid the active voice in our reports, and because the passive looks more professional. This is an example of this text. So in this text, there are some, some critical mistakes that whoever wrote this piece of information, okay, have made some mistakes actually. So let's say this is one of the paragraphs in someone's report. I would like to give you 30 seconds to 1 minute. Just go through it very quickly. Try to highlight the, any mistakes that you feel, not only spelling, but also in terms of the structure of the statements within this paragraph. We will highlight them all together, and we will see the corrected version. But I would like to give you 1 minute, okay? Maximum 1 minute. Let's give 1 minute, and then let's go through it all together, okay? Okay, let's go through this. I hope that you have identified some of the problems within this text. So the first problem, or the obvious ones, I will go through first. So we say, for example, I'm reading, okay, at present on the XYZ substation, we have no facility to supply 12,000 amps. This is the first mistake, okay, that I am highlighting. If I am reading this for the first time, I will not be sure what is amps. If this was the first time you mentioned amps, it is not the right way actually to express amps. So you have to say amperes, okay? Amperes. So to make sure that the reader understands what is this actually unit. And then if you mention this the next time, you can use amps, for example. It is not a problem. Okay, and then if we continue reading, I'm seeing that, okay, from the existing spare OCBs. What is this OCBs? I do not know actually what is OCBs. You have to do not use the abbreviation. If you are mentioning this for the first time, you have to write down the full word actually, and then in brackets you show the abbreviation, as we have done actually in the other one. So this is the correct way: new vacuum circuit breakers, and then I say VCBs, and then whenever I mention VCBs later on, I can use the abbreviation. Okay, so this was an obvious one. So also we can, if we look at present, okay, so at present, so you have, for example, to have a comma in the beginning, or otherwise this will be mixed up with the statement, okay? Another one that I have identified, for example, we have no facility, okay? For example, if you look at, we say we have no facility, this is not really expressing what is the meaning. We have no facility to supply. You can say we are unable to. Okay, you can replace that, we are unable to, because we are not really supplying from a facility, but it could be the same meaning, but you have to be straightforward, okay, with your readers. So the revised, we see that if you revise this, then, for example, OCBs that we mentioned before is actually oil circuit breakers, okay, and this is what we refer to as OCBs. And then when I mention it later on, I can say OCBs. That's not a problem because I mentioned it for the first time. Vacuum circuit breakers, as we mentioned, it is fine. There is nothing about it. It is mentioned clearly, and then you have the abbreviation there. Okay. So these are some of the when it comes to writing and how professional you should be. This is the style that we have to follow. Okay. This is just an example, and I hope that it give you an indication of how critical you have to be. Okay, let's look at diagrams. So whenever we say diagrams, actually, we are referring to tables, graphs, images, photographs, any line drawings, schematic diagrams, any kind of illustration. Okay, this is whenever we mention diagrams, we usually include all of the illustrations within our reports, okay, which are very essential to our report and will clarify a lot of content within our reports. Okay, so positioning the diagrams, whether these are tables, graphs, images, as I mentioned, schematic diagrams, and so on, is very important. So you have to make sure that you position the diagrams within the right place in the document. So you cannot, for example, describe something and then you show the diagram in the next page. It could sometimes happen if you have a very big diagram, but in normal cases, the diagram has to be next to the text. Okay, next to the text. Keep this in mind, next to the text. Okay. So that readers will be able to follow and will be able to gain as much knowledge as they like. And bear in mind that if anyone, I think you have experienced this before, if you open any scientific paper, any report, any textbook, you will be attracted by any diagram actually before you try reading the text. And some diagrams, they have some references, which sometimes you just need the reference actually. You look at the diagram, you take the reference, and then you look up the reference and read for more details. So to sum up in this slide, your diagram must be within the same text or next to the text or in the right place, okay, next to the text that it is describing it. Let's move on to tables, for example. Let's look at diagrams now individually. So for example, tables, we know that in tables we summarize actually the results of an experiment, or we summarize the output, or we do some comparisons sometimes by providing a table to the reader. So the table has to be shown effectively. And some tips actually in creating tables I will include. You have to put the units, for example, okay, in the column headings. So let's say that you have a table. One of the columns is voltage. So do not only say voltage without showing the units. You have to mention voltage between brackets, kilovolts, megavolts, volts. Okay, so you have to show the unit within the columns of the table. Okay, you have also, it is advised that you try to group together the relevant information. Okay, so if you have voltage and current for more than one experiment, so try to group the information. So for example, experiment 1, voltage, current. Experiment 2, voltage, current. For the you have different columns and you group the information based on, to make it easier for the reader actually to follow up. Okay. Regarding figures, figures have to be they are usually they show very accurate details. So make sure that you show very accurate results when you represent your graphs, for example, in figures. Okay. For example, if you are comparing more than one quantity, then make sure that you are using the same scale. Do not or avoid using different scales for different information within the same graph. So if you have one single graph, so make sure that the units, the scale that you are using is the same. Okay, because this has to be very accurate. It will summarize the it will summarize basically the valuable information. It will summarize the lengthy text that you might have described. Okay, diagrams references. This is also important. So you have to provide a caption. Okay, for any diagram that you have, whether it's a table, a graph, an image, any kind of figure you show. So you have to have a proper referencing or caption style for your diagrams. For example, if I have a figure and then I have a caption below that figure saying figure 3.7, this means that this is the 7th figure, okay, in section 3. Okay, so this will help me to locate the figure actually. Okay, so this is, again, it is recommended, but it's up to you. But this is the standard way when we write reports. We have to show the section and the number of figures. So if it is figure 3.7, then this is section 3, figure 7. Okay, so we have to show, the diagrams within our reports in a sequential order. And one way to do that is to follow this style when you caption your figures. This is a checklist for your diagrams. Some questions that you have to ask yourself when you finish your report. You have your diagrams in your report. Ask yourself. Okay, so use this checklist to evaluate your diagrams. So does your diagram give the reader the required information? Is it useful to provide in the first place? Or is it just a redundant piece of information? So you have to make sure that it adds value. It is showing clearly, the reader in a visual way, what you mean actually, or what you are referring to. Okay, is it easy to use? If I'm trying to, let's say that it is a graph, and it has some field data. Is it easy for me to get the field data from your graph? So you have to make sure that your graph is easy to use. Does it look attractive? This is the last thing that you have to worry about, actually. If your graph is accurate, for example, and it shows the required information, then work on its styling. Does it look attractive? So you have to make sure that it looks attractive and doesn't lose the value at the same time of why you are showing it. Okay, the abstract. So of course, when we talk about the abstract, now we are moving to finishing the report. Okay, so the abstract basically summarizes the critical points within the conclusion of your study. Okay, it is showing you the summarizing the key points, as well as it is focusing on certain areas of the study where the reader should be interested about. Okay, so you can also include in your abstract the keyword, and you have to make sure that your abstract is clear and is showing actually what it is required, or what is the study is about. So in the abstract, we basically provide, in the first two sentences, we provide a brief description about why is this report important. And then in the next two statements, the following two statements, you provide the methods that you have used, okay, to evaluate your or to find the results. In the following two statements, you provide the very important and the critical results, okay? And then you conclude your abstract by highlighting the future work, actually, for your study. So this is a very, very basic guideline on the abstract and how you should prepare your abstract. Some tips: when you write your abstract, it is advised that you limit yourself to, or you write as much as you can, and then you try to refine the abstract to about 250 to 300. This is not the summary, this is the abstract. Okay, so it should be between 250 up to 300 words in as a total. Okay, so summing up. Okay, so providing basically your abstract should give. So these are the 4 points that I have mentioned. 2 statements for each one. Okay, so you can consider 2 statements for each one of these elements within your abstract. So 2 statements to give enough background information, okay, to the reader. Why this, maximum 2 statements, and then what you state some very generic background information. Why is this important? And then the next 2 statements, as we mentioned, you comment on the methods that you have used and the major findings, highlighting this from your conclusions and recommendations. And then the following 2 statements, you have to show what are the limitations, basically, of your study, what is the future work. And then I would like to highlight that please avoid using references in your abstract. We do not usually provide any reference in the abstract, because it's the abstract of the work that you have done yourself based on the knowledge that you have gained from the other references. So let's move on to the summary of report writing, which is based on these 10 laws of good report writing. Law number 1: produce the report not for yourself, but for your readers. So you need to make sure that you know your targeted audience, you know who will be reading who is expected to read your report, and then prepare your report based on that. Law number 2: keep the report as short as possible. As we mentioned, make sure that you have, you write in a concise way. You try to summarize things, not to repeat things all and all over again in the report. make it as short as possible. Number 3, organize the information in a convenient order to the reader. And this is what we have discussed in the main sections, actually part of the presentation. So make sure that you have a flow actually in your report, and it is easy for the reader to follow. Number 4, include accurate references. Do not include random references. Do not believe any piece of information you find online unless it is from a reliable and credible reference. Okay, that is very important. Law number 5, ensure your writing is accurate, concise, and straightforward. So as we mentioned, you have to be straightforward. Do not complicate things to the reader. You know your audience, then make sure you be accurate and straightforward based on your audience level. Include diagrams. Number 6, we have to include diagrams with the right labels in the right position, in the right place within the text in the report. So this is very important. Law number 7, make sure you summarize the whole picture actually, and you give the moral of the story. You give the full picture to the reader actually, and this is in the summary or in the abstract of your report. Law number 8, check the report for technical errors, typos, any typing errors, any inconsistent flow of your of the text you have within your report will mislead basically the reader, and will make it very difficult for them to follow. So make sure that you be consistent in your writing. Law number 9, consider design as well as content. So you have to make sure that you design your report, you style the report in terms of font size, font type, the headings as we discussed, and how many levels of the main sections you have. Is it 3 levels, 4 levels? So this is part of the design actually of the report, and make sure that you design as well. You consider designing the report, but you pay attention also to the content, more important. Law number 10, it's basically law number 1 because it is very critical. So produce the report for your reader. After you produce your report, you have to make sure that you are following these laws, and then check again. Law number 10 is repeated because it is very critical when in the start and at the end that you produce your report for your readers. Okay, so these are the 10 laws. So keep these laws in mind, but you do not have to stick yourself actually to these laws, because these are just, as I mentioned at the beginning, very generic guidelines. So, and as we have noticed that the first law is repeated because this law shouldn't be broken. You have to prepare the report for your reader actually. Okay. This is about the good report writing. I will move on now very briefly, talking about the preparing any technical or scientific papers actually. I will start with this figure actually. So writing scientific papers is quite different than preparing a report. So you do not usually start, when you write a scientific paper, you do not usually start from the introduction or from the beginning. Okay, there is a certain flow that will help you to prepare the your scientific paper that you'll publish in a conference or in a journal. Okay, so this diagram or this flow chart actually, or let's say block diagram, call it as you wish, is summarizing to us the flow of the writing style that you have to follow when it comes to preparing your scientific paper. So you have to start with the vision statement. These are your objectives. What is your vision in this paper? Remember that papers are limited in pages. So if I have a full report and I have too many results, then I'm choosing one scenario or one case or one study and I'm publishing it. So out of a report, I can make more than one paper actually, if I have a lot of results. So you can think about it this way. So the vision statement is, you have to decide which area within your report are you trying to publish. Okay, so we might have more than one case, more than one scenario, so we have to think about that. You have to prepare your figures actually as well, and then you start the methodology, results and discussions, and then you move on to the conclusion, and then you write the introduction and the abstract. You provide the references and the title. So this is the flow actually. So the flow of writing, or to organize your time so that you can write your paper is very important, and it will actually save you a lot of time. Okay, so when you write a paper, you are writing actually to the audience, okay, who might have a background similar to yours or more advanced. Okay, so this is what you have to think about when you provide your paper. It's different than the report, because it will be reviewed, it has to get accepted, to be approved, to be published, and people who will review your paper actually, or who will read actually your paper later on, are specialized actually on the topic you are publishing in. So make sure that you are targeting again the right audience. So these are the 10 steps to write a scientific paper. So the first thing that you have to do is to write a vision statement. Vision statement is basically, you can think of it as the objectives of the paper actually. If you are not able to write this statement or to provide the objectives of the paper, then you are not ready to publish. Okay? You have to make sure that you are really understanding why you are writing this paper. What are the objectives? Okay, so do not start at the beginning. Okay, when you write the paper, don't start at the beginning, because this will it's not like writing a report. It is quite different. You have a study, you want to publish this study now. The third step is that you have to storyboard the figures. So prepare the figures, because in a paper actually you have, as we mentioned, one case actually that you are discussing very specifically. So you need to make sure that you provide the figures for the study that you are planning to publish, or the methodology, including the methodology that you are trying or you are following. Okay, then write the method section. This is step number 4. You have the figures, okay, and you know the objective now of your writing. So write the method section. Start with the methodology. Okay. Step number 5, write the results and discussions. So after you provide the method, write the results and discussions, and then write the conclusion. After that, you write the introduction, because now you have a clear vision which case you have selected from your project. You have selected, some results. You discussed the results. You have came up with the conclusion. Now you can write the introduction, because in the introduction you will be, showing basically at the end of it the scope of the paper. So you need to know, before you write the introduction, what are the results you will be dealing with, what are the methods you are using. Step number 8, assemble the references. So you need to make sure, as we discussed before, which style we are using. You need to cite the statements within your report properly, and then you have to show the list of references. Then step number 9, write the abstract within the paper, which is 250 to 300 words as a maximum. This is based on IEEE standard, and then the title comes last. So do not write the title of your paper before you finish everything, because when you finish the paper, you have a clear vision now that, okay, have a crystal clear vision that this is my paper, it's about this case, about this specific topic, and then you can come up with the title. So it is very important that we follow these steps in a sequential order, okay? It is very important for paper writing. The sequence is very important. So the writing a vision statement is, as I mentioned, is basically you can ask yourself a question. What is the key message of your paper actually? Why are you writing this paper? Okay? What are you contributing to? So you have to set your objectives again for the specific tasks that you are trying or scenarios that you are trying to include in your paper. Okay, so the vision statement should guide you actually to the next important decision. Where are you submitting? If because we know that there are a lot of conferences, a lot of journals. Each conference, each journal specialized in one field. So you have to set or to select, the piece of information from your report carefully, and therefore this will help you to decide where you will publish your paper actually. So, and make sure that you are following. Every journal has a different style, and every conference might have a different template. So make sure that you have the right template for the journal or for the conference to be able to produce your paper. Okay. So this is regarding the vision statement. So do not start at the beginning. As we mentioned, for papers, it's quite different than reports. So sometimes, if you should think about logically, you say, okay, it's to start the paper with the abstract, writing the abstract, or at least the introduction. Please do not do that, because you will face a lot of issues. You will feel frustrated, and you will not be able to write your paper. So follow the order that we have discussed before, based on the steps. Okay, so that's why I was saying do not start from the beginning, because if you start with the introduction, by the time everything else is written, you will likely have to rewrite both sections, because the introduction will change. If you finish your paper, the introduction is, as I mentioned, guiding the reader what this paper is about. So you might have to change the entire introduction if you write it down, and then you show the remaining sections, and then you go back to it, or you refer back to it. So do not follow your logic when you write a paper, actually. Okay, about the figures, you have, as we mentioned, to organize your figures, make sure your figures are ready, and then you move on to the methodology section. It is an important one to talk about. So from all sections, the methodology must show the steps or the process or procedure that you have followed, and based on it, you have found your results. So any results in your paper should be replicable based on the methods section. So when you show the methodology, you have to make sure that all the results that you have found out or you have reported in your paper, they are the output, or they are produced based on the method that you have shown actually in the paper. So this is very important. So make sure that you provide all the required references, all the steps of the references, and that anyone who reads your paper is able to read your methodology, and then they are able to reproduce the results based on your methodology. Okay, so one common mistake when writing the methods actually is including results. So in the methodology section, we do not really include any results. You just show the method. You just show the steps, the procedure. What is the method that you are following? Okay, so it is the process. It's like the processor actually of your paper actually, that based on you got your results. Okay, so the method section is simply a record of what you did. So the steps that you have conducted, if it's an experiment, if it is simulations, if it is mathematical derivation, so you have to show that in the methodology. and then you move on to the results and discussion section. So you have to make sure that within the results and discussions, it is a new section within the paper, okay, one of the main sections within your paper, okay, and do not combine that with the methodology as we mentioned. So here in the results, you have to show the scenarios or the cases that you are, or the experiment that the result actually of the case study or the scenarios or the experiments, the simulations, the equations that you have used. So these are purely the results, and you discuss them. In the discussions, so you can actually start by, or you can start by writing very few paragraphs, okay, based on the results that you have, and you can explain basically the results based and how relevant the results are to your vision statement, or what is the benefit of your results, and then you start showing some comparisons. Okay, so you compare, for example, this type with this type, this size with that size. Okay, this case with the other case. So this is one way that will help you as well to show your analysis, show your observations. Comparisons is one of the solutions if you are, struggling in the results and discussions section. Okay. So make sure that you discuss your results. You do not only show your results, but you have to discuss them. Discuss them means you have to analyze, you have to observe, to write what you have, observed in the lab, for example, or what, based on the simulations, what results have you got? You compare values, use quantitative comparison or qualitative comparison. So it depends on your study. Writing the conclusion is basically summarizing everything you have already written in your paper, so showing the what you have exactly done and what is the final output from your paper. You can also show the recommendation, or you can show that that is how you achieved your objective based on the study. So this is all in the introduction actually. Okay. So the reader should understand the whole story of your, your work that you have done, the methodology and results from your conclusion. Okay, so you have to summarize that to show the big picture actually in the conclusion, including any significant findings. Okay, do not include all findings, but the most critical, the significant finding, the breakthrough within your research, you can highlight that in your conclusion. Okay, writing the introduction, as we said, is after you write the conclusion. So so you have to show basically to introduce the paper to the reader, and you have within your introduction you have, so it's like a historical background of the existing knowledge, okay, and including at the end of it the structure of your paper. Actually, this is what introductions usually in papers we do it this way. We can include some literature actually, or we highlight the important or the identified problems that you are trying to solve based on literature. So you can highlight these in the introduction as well. Okay. So this is a very important point. The majority of your references have to be actually included in the introduction. So your introduction should be full of references. Okay. After that, the literature review should also include references. The other sections should not include any references if possible. Okay. And then we talked about the references. I think it is similar to reports, so you have to make sure that you are following the right style of referencing, which style fits perfect, and you have to check the requirements of the journal you are publishing in or the conference you are trying to publish in. Okay. Um, these again are examples of how referencing basically within your document. So you have to make sure that the reader has enough information, okay, about your references. So make sure that you provide the if you are quoting, for example, or there is a statement that you got from a reference, make sure that you show it clearly, okay, to the reader, and you provide detailed information about it. So it is similar to what we have discussed in reports or for reports. Writing the abstract for IEEE conferences and journals, sometimes they ask as minimum as 150. Sometimes they allow up to 300 words. So you can imagine how difficult it is. And this is in sentences, as we mentioned, this is from 10 to 20, depending on your writing style. So if you say 150, as we discussed, this is like 8, I would say also to 10, in that range in terms of sentences. So that's why we keep it till the end, until we get the full picture of the paper. We know what we have shown. We know the conclusions. We have, all the details about the information that we have published. Then you write the abstract and you summarize that, imagine in 10 sentences or so. Okay, so that's about the abstract. So you have in your abstract, follow the guideline, the what we have discussed. So 2 statements as an introduction or as a background, 2 statements, the methods that you have used, 2 other statements highlighting the key findings. So these are 6 statements, 2 other statements showing the key results and the limitations and the future work. And so these are 8. The other 2, if you have 150 words, the other 2 remaining statements, you can include them in the results or in the methodology as you need. Okay, so this is regarding the abstract. The title has to be, or has to be attractive. It has also to show the main contribution of the paper, because if you have a report, for example, on let's say on renewable energy sources. This is your report. When you publish a paper, your paper has to be specific. So your first paper might be about solar PV systems. Your second paper could be about wind farms. Your third paper could be about geothermal technology. So something like that. So you have to chop actually your report into small pieces, and you publish these small pieces in their relevant journals and abstracts. So the title has to reflect actually the the area that you are trying to publish in. So make sure that you select the title carefully, and within the title, it is advised that you use some of the trending keywords. For example, if renewables is the trending keyword now, or if smart grids is the trending keyword, so make sure that you try to include that in your report so that you get more citations. I would like to thank the IEEE student section for organizing this event. I was delighted to share this presentation with everyone. If you have any questions about writing reports or technical papers, scientific papers, I am more than happy to help, and how to find me. And I think what I have shared is a very generic guideline that you can follow. You will be able, you can use that as the baseline that you can build actually upon and improve your writing skills in reports and scientific papers. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in next event.
Thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, it will be a very valuable lecture for us. And as we see, there's a good techniques that we can use in our reports or to write scientific papers. I'm not sure if you have any question, guys. You can write it in the chat if there is any questions.
Give them last chance.
I think there's no question. So regarding the slide, you can guys go back, come back to the our YouTube channel. The lecture will be recorded and saved for. You can see it later on. And also regarding some files like IEEE references, we can share it also in the email with the certification.
Regarding sharing a professional written report, as I mentioned in the presentation, it depends on your audience. It depends on the study that you are conducting. So I'm afraid if I share one of the reports, then you might be misled actually when you go through the report. I'm sure if I can share actually some links online where you can find some reports that will be very useful actually for you when you try to establish your report. But as I mentioned, it is very important that you have to understand that if something applies to one report, it might not be applicable for any other report. Okay, but we can share some links. That is not not an issue. That is totally fine.
Okay, again, thank you for attendance. you can check our social media accounts for upcoming events. Again, thank you.